Hello, welcome, Jonathan Beard.
Hello, it's so nice to be with you, Ching.
So that was beautiful. Let me introduce you to our audience first. Jonathan's biography is at under the YouTube description. I'm gonna just read part of it. Jonathan Beard, composer and orchestrator, creates music for media and counter stage. As a composer, his recent projects include the electroacoustic suite ritual, the video sound installation that tu puño letra. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. In collaboration with Suzanne Lacy, film scores for What Will Remains and Heavenquest, and his electroacoustic opera Cesare, Child of Night. He has served on the composing teams for video games such as Star Wars, Battlefront 1 and 2, and guest composed for ABC's Once Upon a Time. For the stage, Jonathan co composed the oratorio, The Passion of Anne Frank, for the Los Angeles Master Chorale as part of their vocals within residence. And his original theater score for Driving Miss Daisy received an NAACP Theatre Award nomination. So thank you so much. Jonathan has more credits under his belt, and he also teaches in the university. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yes. So tell us a little bit what we just heard. The piece.
Sure. So the piece that you were just playing on the intro is the first piece from my 5-movement electroacoustic suite Ritual, which is this new album release that has just come into the world. And the instrumentation for this work overall of the five movements within the overall suite is for a series of electronic textures and sounds and instruments that I designed from scratch, combined with a somewhat unusual chamber acoustic ensemble as well. So the acoustic instruments include alto and bass recorder, cello, a relatively large battery of percussion, and a slightly unusual organ. And then what am I leaving out? That might be it. There are 6 different things. But yeah, so it's a combination of these somewhat unexpected acoustic timbres combined of these instruments that you wouldn't necessarily always put together, combined then with electronic textures as well.
Wonderful. Now, you've done so many different things from staging or theater and film, lots of film music. And can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? I'm sure people ask you about that. I always like to know, like, where does this musical thing come from? Is your parents musicians, and did you start music very early age?
Sure. So the short answer is yes. My father was a university professor, and he had played trumpet when he was younger, and then put it away for most of the time that I knew him. Once I got on the scene, but when I was in high school, he actually picked his trumpet back up again for the first time since he had been in high school. And nowadays, he plays probably 2 to 3 hours a day. You can't get him to stop playing his trumpet. So that's amazing on that side. My mother is a fully classically trained musician who has been a music teacher for her professional life. So she is a teacher of both piano and voice, and still teaches to this day. So I grew up very much in a musical household, and both of my older brothers played instruments when I was young. My oldest brother was a violinist. My middle brother was actually a recorder player. That's some of where my love of recorder comes from. And the music was just always in the house. There's no question about it. I started playing cello at about, I was 6 years old when I started playing cello, just before my 7th birthday. And continue to play cello to this day, although it's no longer my primary focus. Composing and orchestration is where the main focus is now. But that's kind of where things started for me as a player. I probably started composing in late middle school, getting into high school. We can talk about some of that more. But my college studies were in composition, but I always kept a full cello regimen as well on the side. So even though I couldn't technically double major in music and music, I did composition both in undergraduate and for my graduate work, but also did cello, the sort of a full load of cello work in undergraduate and graduate school as well.
So as a composer, lot of I'm just moving around the light a little bit.
Sure.
Lot of composer they play piano, keyboard. So do you need to play the keyboard to be able to do all the counterpoint stuff?
Sure. I don't think you need to.
Okay.
Particularly in this era, there are other ways to achieve contrapuntal sound and how to study harmony. I'm living proof that you don't need to be a great pianist, certainly, to still write music. I have some piano skill, but it's relatively dormant at this point. I was a pop and mild, mainly a pop pianist. I've never been a classical pianist, but I played in some rock bands when I was younger, in college and shortly after college, where I was the keyboard player. So from that side of things, I had a little bit of that in my earlier life. I am still comfortable finding my way around a keyboard, but I'm not the pianist you would want to hear sit down and play a significantly contrapuntal work.
Yeah.
Let alone on an offer. Yeah, anything like that. So so yes, mild piano experience. I wouldn't call myself skilled.
Yeah. Great. So now you are talking to me right now from Los Angeles?
Yes.
Oh, it's so amazing. I'm in New York. And then did you grow up there or you?
No, I grew up north of San Francisco, actually. So I grew up in the Sonoma County wine country. So about 50 miles north of San Francisco, and then moved to Los Angeles originally for graduate school. So I did my graduate school at UCLA, where I now also do a little bit of teaching. I'm a lecturer at UCLA in my downtime from my professional work, which I love very much. I mean, I love to teach. I don't have time in my schedule to do it more than I'm doing now, but I love to do the bit that I do.
Yeah.
And I've been in LA ever since.
So now you call yourself orchestrator, which I don't, hear this word enough, So tell our audience, what is an orchestrator?
Sure. So I'll preface that by kind of putting it in the context of the sort of portfolio of my overall career. Yeah. In a certain way, my career is a series of identities and elements that on the surface may look like they're in contradiction to one another, but just below the surface, certainly for people that know me, they realize that they're very interconnected. My overall portfolio is sort of split between this world of composing and this world of orchestration, and I'll explain what the difference between those two is in a moment. But also, my composing world is split between electronic electronic and electroacoustic composition, which is where my real passion lies, from the composing side. And then again, over in that orchestration world, that's referring to an acoustic world, acoustic orchestration. So So that also may look like a contradiction, but to me, they are actually quite connected just under the surface. So to explain what an orchestrator does, most people have a pretty clear idea of what a composer does. An orchestrator is I guess the best way to put it would be, it's a support role to a composer, and it can actually take a number of different identities. I have a metaphor that I can use. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it gets close. And my orchestration partners, I work with a couple of other orchestrators very closely, and we like to use this metaphor when we're talking about what we do. And that is, if you imagine that a composer is like an architect, an orchestrator is like an engineer. So the architect, when building a building, is responsible for the big picture, the vision, right? They create what the building is going to look like. And then at some point, they turn their sketches over to an engineer who is responsible for bringing that vision to technical completion. Now, some architects are extremely hands-on and precise. Basically, they've given an incredibly clear set of instructions, and all an engineer has to do is take those instructions, implement them word for word, measurement by measurement, and boom, it's done. Some architects are more sort of big vision thinkers, and they may create a very clear and sort of remarkable, unique idea, but with some gaps left in. And they'll give some instructions to the engineer to say, I want you to work out how to fill in these gaps. Now, if we take that relationship and put it over into music, as an orchestrator to my architect composer, who I might be working with, the composer will, particularly in music for media, so in music for films or television or games, often due to reasons of time alone, a composer will not have time to fill in every single detail of the music that they are composing. They will compose a sketch of that music that is clear enough that the people who can hear it, who need to approve it, whether that's the director of a film or the producer of a video game or whatever, that they can hear how that music is going to work and say, okay, good, that music works, it's approved, move on to the next piece of music. Well, there may still be some gaps that need to be filled in to fully make that sketched music ready to be recorded by a live orchestra of live human musicians. And so that's where my job as an orchestrator comes in. I fill in those gaps, or I do the translating sort of from the digital demo version, the sort of digital sketch, that like final score that the orchestra will perform from. Now, just like with architects, some composers are much more precise and give incredibly intricate and detailed instructions. And so on that side of the spectrum, my job as an orchestrator would be mainly to transcribe their instructions from that digital medium over to being a piece of a music score that a live orchestra can read. And then some composers may be a little bit more, particularly if they trust me and have worked with me for a long time, they may leave some more gaps, but then just give me some instructions on how to fill it in. So it might say like, okay, I've got the main part of this section. What's really sort of the important part is the strings. Those are all fully composed and they're being supported by the brass in the background. I haven't put the woodwinds in yet, but you know what I want the woodwinds to do there. Make them sparkle and sort of add some color here and there to the string part. Sort of giving little bits of sort of audible flair to what's going on in the strings. And then I go off and I figure out a good way to do that. So the range of basically how much I am just purely translating very precise instructions over to having there be elements where maybe there's an idea of what needs to be there, but it's still up to me to fully fill in the gap. That's more on the arranging side of the job of orchestration, and everything kind of in between. So it can cross that whole spectrum. But essentially, that is a long and detailed answer of how an orchestrator works with a composer.
Yeah, I cannot imagine how much work it is, but it is a very collaborative work, right? It's not like you stay in your space and write a piece of symphonic music and then deliver to orchestra, having them play. So you being an film composer or orchestrator, I imagine there is a lot of give and take process going on.
It's certainly collaborative, particularly in the world of media music. I mean, it's collaborative in the classical world and in the recording world as well, in slightly different ways. But certainly in the world of music for TV, film,
Right.
there's collaboration at basically every level. I need to be working with the composer to fulfill, if I'm orchestrating, say, I need to be working with the composer to help fulfill their vision for what the score needs to do. If I'm the composer of a film or a game, I need to be working with the director to make sure that my vision of the score is fulfilling their vision of what the film needs. Because at the end of the day, this is music that has a job to do.
Right.
It needs to help tell the story.
Right.
So in many ways, it's collaboration at every level. I love to tell my students that, and this was advice that was given to me when I was young, which is recognize that composing music for films or for television, it is a service job. You are in service of something larger than yourself. And it always needs to be doing the job that it's there to do. So forget your ego, forget whatever else at the door. If your music is not doing its job, which is both helping to support the story, however the story needs to be supported, but then also helping to please the people who are making the film, making the game, making the show. If it's not doing that, then you're failing at your job. So always remember that it's in service of something bigger than yourself.
Now I'm going to ask a question, and then we'll play excerpts of your music. So for young composers out there, I see you have you've done so many film, over 100 films, and so how did you break into the industry? Is it? I'm sure it's like a many nights story, but just give us a quick sort of a scoop of. How did you get into it?
Yeah, there are different layers, as you alluded to. There are different layers to the answer of this question. But for when young people are asking me, certainly the version of the answer that I give, which leaves out boring details, goes something like, I'll start with a little bit of advice, and then I can sort of say how it applied to me. And things I wish I had known more when I was just starting out. But a big part of it is knowing your craft and knowing your tech, knowing all of the tools that you're going to need to use to do that job really, really well. And then recognizing that that is basically just step one to get you in the door, because excellence is already assumed. Anytime you're working with this stuff, the assumption is that you know how to use the tools, how to actually do the job. From there, it gets into some of these intangibles of how to make sure that you are providing the necessary support and collaboration to the people that you are working with. And in terms of, and this will get back into how I broke in terms of starting out, in particular, recognizing that the number one thing you can do to help to break in is to work with people who are already doing it, right? Some sort of, whether that's an assistantship or a mentorship even, or just getting a chance to, sort of shadow someone who's already doing the work. the number one thing you can do for anyone who is doing hard work under tight deadlines is help solve their problems. Don't contribute to their problems. Help alleviate their problems.
Yeah.
And my version of all of this, to actually get back and answer your question, is a bit of a mix of all of that. So the other part I'd answer before I get into my version is it's a long haul thing. It's very, very few people who just sort of instantly have a career. It takes time, it takes dedication, and it takes being good, and then it takes a lot of being lucky. Let's not kid ourselves. But if you're not good and you're lucky, it's not going to help you. You have to be good and lucky. And so my version of this is basically that after getting out of school, I had a couple of composers who early on in my career mentored me, and I assisted them. And that helped me get some experience. It got me some of my earliest orchestration credits as well, which was important to me because I've been in love with orchestration since I was probably similar to around the time I started composing. They've always been sort of in tandem for me. So from late middle school, early high school, I've been fascinated by that process of orchestration. And so even while I was still in school, in graduate school, I got to orchestrate on a couple of films. And then I had a couple of composers who kept looking out for me a little bit early on in my career and gave me some more opportunities when they could, right? And this gets into another, bit of advice for young folks. And this is one I wish I had recognized more early, which is about rejection and the fact that busy people don't mean anything personal by not being able to help you at a given time. You just need to keep making yourself available to help people. And when they need help, they'll find you. And if they can help you, they will when they can. I certainly had times early on where I wasn't, gnashing teeth and feeling inadequate because people would say no, that, hey, can I work for you? Can I help you in some way? It's like, actually, I don't have a need for that right now. That's okay. That's okay. I wish I could have told my younger self that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So in my case, I had a couple of mentors. It gets said a lot. I don't like the word networking. I love the word relationships. I think it's important to remember that basically all creativity is a relationship business. There are a very few number of people who completely do their work off 100% alone, and then 100% alone put it out into the world and reach an audience without anyone else collaborating with them in some way. So all of creativity is relationships, almost. And I treasure that incredibly deeply, and it informs everything I do from orchestration over into my composing. And that takes time to grow. So that's also part of it. So I had some people I started to meet early on. I did some good work for them that led to some recommendations to other people. And from there, sort of a career starts to get established. Not too long after I got out of school, I also met my orchestration partners, and we began working together. And about 5 years ago now, we established a little company together called Tutti Music Partners. And I on that orchestration side, I feel incredibly lucky that I get to work with two of my good friends all the time. And so having that as well, so not just mentors who are sort of at levels above you, reaching down to help, but finding those people who are also beside you and figuring out ways to create communities and teams of collaborators, that creates a fulfilling musical life in my opinion.
Wonderful. Shall we play the Midwinter?
Sure. Okay.
Tell us.
So this is
for it. And
This is a part, we should set this up because this is a part of the project, and we haven't talked about sort of the conceptual elements behind ritual yet, but we can. Of the 5 pieces, one of the parts of this process on this new album that I have been thrilled about is that I have been joined for interdisciplinary collaborations with other artists who work in fields outside of music. And we are creating a video for each of the 5 pieces in the Ritual Suite that features the work of these other artists. So a couple of design artists, digital design artists who do really fascinating and beautiful digital compositing work and digital design. An amazing painter who created pieces, who created paintings and drawings inspired by my music, which is just an incredible feeling. And then in the case of this video that we're going to show now, this is actually the first video we're releasing of the 5. And Ching, you have the premiere here, so so I'm thrilled that this is going to make its way out into the world now. This is a collaboration with a performance collective called Good Troublemakers. And my dear and talented friend, choreographer, Kai Hazelwood, directed this video. She conceived this video and directed it. And it was shot completely during the pandemic. And so you can see the amazing work of these artists who, in Good Troublemakers, and sort of the creation of this video inspired by my piece Midwinter, which is one of the 5 pieces from the Ritual Suite.
okay, here we go.
I just love that video.
Bravo. Bravissimo. Great, great. Yeah. So artsy and very mysterious also. I wanted to thank our audience a little bit. There's a lot of people have joined us. Thank you, Nick. And Nicole made some very nice comment. Little, let's see. Can you read it? Can you see it, Jonathan? The comments.
Can I see it?
Yeah. Can you see the comments? Earlier, Nicole made some comments.
Sure. Let's see. Oh, this Duke Ellington comment. Yeah, I love this. So when Rick Wilkins, so this is Nicholas Tristan. Thanks for this anecdote, Nicholas. When Rick Wilkins was orchestrating a ballet for Duke Ellington in the 70s, one night Duke slipped a note under his hotel room door that only said, "It's a pas de deux. You know what to do." Love it.
Yeah, it's funny. And
I'll give a comparative anecdote about a piece I needed to arrange once, which was for a film. Time was tight. There was a melody, and the composer just said, "Here's the melody. Needs to sound like John Barry Dances with Wolves. Go."
So thank you, Ching Juhl actually is my son who's in the audience.
Sean.
I told him to watch you. I said, Jonathan writes music for a video game too. Sean is an accomplished violist and studied at Juilliard School.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, he just won the Juilliard viola competition last year. So he's not shabby.
Very nice. You must be proud.
Yes, I am very proud. Then Sherry Grant made some really nice comment. Who this is such helpful advice. Oh wow, this is such helpful advice. Yeah. After many years of being a performing musician, just this June, I started writing poetry for the first time. Now I just started composing by setting my own poems to music. Bravo, Sherry.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So Nicole made more comment, and we have Jake Morgan, awesome video. Sarah, thank you. Sarah Beard, I wonder who that is.
Hi, Sarah.
Way
so
to
glad
go.
you're here.
Way to go, Jonathan. Rick Riviera says, wonderful premiere piece. Do you play the video games you compose music for?
Quick answer, yes, usually. I should also mention Jake Morgan, who is on the chat. Hey, Jake, is director of one of the other videos that will be premiered in the coming weeks. So really excited about the collaborative elements of this project. So even though Ritual is not film music, it's not music that I had to compose to someone else's specifications.
Yeah.
Even though Ritual is definitely just my own work, in my studio cave, composing the music that I'm feeling inside. The fact that it has still, and this gets back to my earlier point, I suppose, still has turned into this collaborative, this little village that exists around the project, brings me such joy. And it's wonderful to be able to share the creativity with other really talented people around the project as well.
Yeah, so I have I guess a comment maybe or question. So for this piece you just played, Midwinter. Now, the music video and music exists first.
Correct.
All right.
The music existed first.
Yeah. So it's very different, right? For the film music, usually do you guys write for film is in the middle of the production or almost end, and then you will put music in because at this moment you need music?
Right. It can vary. Sometimes it's more in the middle. Sometimes it can even be quite early if there's some musical part of a media project that needs to be figured out in advance, essentially. But the sort of traditional time when all of the final music gets figured out is later in the process. It's during post-production where the film has gotten edited, so the timings are now more precise, and then the music needs to precisely match the timings of the visuals. But you're right that in the case of Ritual, it's interesting that the process has basically turned back around the other way. The music existed first, and to have other artworks created to the music instead of creating the music to the other visual art has been a really special experience, certainly for me, since it's not the way I'm normally doing it on the film and orchestration side of my work.
Yeah. So for this work we just played, now how does a videographer decide what image to go with your music? Do you tell her or he, this is the story?
No, so this was part of my deal with all of these collaborators who I worked with.
Yes.
So in the case of Kai Hazelwood, in this case, the creative mind behind the Midwinter concept for the video, she had the music, and very much as a part of our process, it was, I don't get to tell you anything that you have to do. My only instructions, my only inspiration is the music that I'm turning over to you. Please take this and do something that speaks to you with the music. And so she came up with that concept completely on her own, with good troublemakers, with her performance collective collaborators. And I'm just thrilled that I get to go along for the ride. You know, again, spending so much time kind of alone in your writing room, coming up with ideas and creating the music, to then get to share that experience with other artists, taking your music and running with it in some unique way that speaks to them. That's a special feeling.
Very interesting. Now, before we play another excerpts of yours, I wanted to ask, the pandemic, how did that affecting film music recording? Because people cannot be together, people are not going to be indoor, with the orchestra.
Sure.
And how does that go?
So it's affected different parts of the music business in different ways. Certainly at the very start of the pandemic, most things fully shut down for a little while. In the case of music for media, because music is generally composed kind of alone, right? You don't have to be around a bunch of people to write the music. The challenge is how to record music in a safe way. And so there have been different creative approaches to that people have been trying out. Musicians recording alone in their own home studios and then having that music assembled after the fact and edited together has been one approach. We've been doing some orchestral recordings again here in Hollywood, where basically we take these really big rooms that are designed to fit a gigantic orchestra, and instead of having that whole gigantic orchestra in the room at the same time, we split it up and record smaller sections of the orchestra separately so that we can spread them out more. So imagine taking a string section and taking the actual physical space that you would need for brass, woodwinds, percussion, and strings, and just spread the strings out over all of that space. And you could get 10 feet of space, say, between each string player. And if they're all wearing masks, it's obviously not 100% risk-free, but it's a relatively safe way to record. And then combining those sections together after the fact. So there have been different approaches, but recording has continued on in some way. Where it obviously has completely stopped or almost completely stopped, is in live performance space. So staging an opera right now with a live audience, staging a symphonic concert with a big orchestra on a stage and an audience in the seats. That isn't really possible right now. So it's fascinating to see what orchestras and other companies are doing to sort of combat that during this time. I'm fascinated to see, for instance, here on the West Coast, the LA Chamber Orchestra has announced that their next season is going to be 100% virtual. And they've actually hired an opera director who I admire very much, a guy named James Dara, who is basically, he is just his job. He's essentially creating the digital dramatic presentation of this concert season. So it's still going to be very inventive. There's going to be multimedia facets to it. I'm sure it's going to be fascinating to sort of see how they do this whole season. But it is not going to be an orchestra with audiences in the seats in their regular concert hall. Right. So you're seeing orchestras and opera companies all grappling with creative new ways to still put on a season. And it's going to be fascinating for sure.
Yeah. So you wanted to, I think you wanted to emphasize a little bit more on your concert repertoire and staging position. Can you tell us? Oh, by the way, before I forget, Jonathan has a YouTube channel. It is young, but please subscribe to. I told him you don't need a YouTube channel, but.
And I should clarify, I actually have had a YouTube channel for, I think, 6 or 7 years, but it's been completely dormant for 6 years and 11 months of those 7 years or whatever. Wow. So we're going to be starting to, sort of gently relaunch my YouTube channel at Jonathan Beard Music. I think, it's there in the bottom of the screen.
And by the way, I love YouTube, so I've been developing a YouTube channel myself, and so hopefully, you guys can subscribe mine as well. Juhl Media. So tell me about your concert thing.
Well, it's interesting because we started to get into this a little bit earlier with the kind of contradictions of the, sort of surface contradictions that underneath are incredibly interconnected for me in terms of my artistic identity. So collaboration obviously runs very deeply in everything I do. I think we've covered that already. But in my concert music, I tend much more, as I mentioned, towards this electroacoustic space, as opposed to my orchestration music, my film music, which is much more orchestrally focused, particularly since I do so much orchestration work. And what really connects for me under the surface of that is timbre, and the fact that I am fascinated by musical color, sort of by sound color. And that applies both in the acoustic sphere with orchestration. Certainly the orchestra is capable of the widest swath. I've joked sometimes that the orchestra is one of the most fascinating synthesizers in the world, because you can create so many amazing colors with an orchestra at your disposal. But I'm also fascinated by the musical colors and the textural colors that I can create from sounds that come from outside of traditional acoustic instruments. And that's the world where electronic sound design comes in. And so it's kind of always been this other side of what I do. And creating sounds from unexpected sources, repurposing sounds from expected sources, but using them in new ways. That's stuff I love to grapple with in my concert music and in sort of my more art-driven music, such as the Ritual Suite.
Shall we hear another excerpt from the old list?
Sure. What
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 about?
should we do? We have do we have Thanatosis available? That's a third piece from the ritual suite. Why don't we listen to a little bit of this? This is a really quiet movement designed to be very unsettling. So we'll listen to a little bit of this, and then I can talk about the overall concept of what ritual as a suite is, because we'll have now heard bits of 3 different movements, including the one that we started with. But this movement triggers some anxiety. It has a relationship sort of to an anxiety triggering event, and there's apprehension that rises, and it's dealing with that feeling of being in an uncomfortable place where you have to figure out how to survive within the moment. So we can have a little bit of Thanatosis.
Okay, here we go. Can't hear me. Sorry.
There we
I muted myself. Yeah. Sorry. Very haunting and Definitely has a lot of colors. Is that the cello playing by yourself?
That cello was performed by me, yes. So all of the cello solos on the album are me. But it is electronically processed at certain times.
Okay.
So I'm also sort of weaving the cello back in with the electronics as well.
Yeah.
So this movement, Thanatosis, which is actually the fourth movement in the five, it's actually the oldest one. It's the first one that I composed. And it started to give me the idea. It actually was collaborative, in fact, in that there was a choreographic element to go with it. It was originally for a live dance performance, but it started to give me more of this idea for the ritual suite as a whole eventually, which the whole piece, the five movements together, they're grappling with what I call agnostic devotional repetition in different ways. And so the fact that we have all of these sort of ancient traditions that, if you're a religious person, may have to do with church services or something in the religious sphere. If you're not, it may be devotional practices of other types. Say, if in a modern context, you think about sort of like with modern mindfulness practices and with modern yoga practices, all of this stuff is tapping into traditions that are very, very old, but concepts of breathing and the rhythmic repetition of certain practices, sort of devotional in a religious sense or otherwise, but ways of centering through repetition. And as you may have heard in the first piece, for example, that you played, Ching, at the beginning today, the Quest movement, and then certainly in Midwinter, there are musical repetitive elements in those movements. And then that continues even more in some of the movements that we're not playing today. But there's lots of exploration of devotional repetition, essentially, within the music itself. In the case of this movement, Thanatosis,
Jonathan,
yes.
What does that mean?
So Thanatosis is essentially, it is playing dead. So it's the idea of like what a possum does to try and avoid a threatening situation. If you can appear to already, it's basically playing possum. So in the case of this movement, Thanatosis, you're not hearing really sort of heavy repetition in terms of short musical phrases that are repeating over and over. There's some very slow repetition. You hear certain motifs come back around. But the repetition within this movement is actually sort of, it's almost like a layer deeper, which is when you're in a state of panic, when you're in a state of high anxiety, what is it that we as human beings do to get that back under control? And you can hear that in the recorded breathing in the piece a little bit, which is we focus on repeating our breath and the repetition of our exhales. And through that, we can find a state of calm again. So that's the way that this particular movement is grappling with the concept and the theme of sort of devotional repetition to finding a better place within yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very interesting. Now, there is a very, very, I really love the work you did on the Stravinsky's Rite of Spring.
Oh.
Should we show our audience a little bit of it?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. So this is an electroacoustic piece from a handful of years ago. I think about 6 years ago now. It was commissioned by the Pacific Symphony of Orange County, except that it's an electronic piece, essentially. This was a fascinating project. So in celebration of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, the 100-year anniversary of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, the Pacific Symphony did a project that was interdisciplinary multimedia celebrating the anniversary. And they asked me to design a series of sounds that were taken, essentially sampled from the Pacific Symphony's performances of Rite of Spring, of Stravinsky's orchestral piece. And then that could then be repurposed to essentially be used as remix material for people to repurpose in the sort of installation that they had installed outside of their performing hall. So you would go to the concert, and before the concert started, or at the intermission, or after the concert, you'd have these stations where you could basically work with Stravinsky's audio material yourself, which I had curated, that allowed people to create their own Stravinsky remixes, essentially. And as part of that, Pacific Symphony asked me to do a flagship remix of Rite of Spring, which I call Chaos in the Garden. So this is the full name per the Pacific Symphony was Chaos in the Garden, a rewrite of Spring. Good little pun there. But it is, I'm essentially taking recording elements, audio elements of Stravinsky's piece, repurposing them, using them as found electronic material now to create a recomposed sort of new composition. So yeah, we can hear a little bit of it. Should we
start from middle, like 4 minutes around?
I'd start at the top so we can hear the kind of the quiet place.
Color, right?
Yeah, in some way this is sort of setting the stage.
Okay. All right, here we go. This is a file from what do you call Dropbox? So there's no early image.
Right. And I may talk through a couple bits of this.
Sure.
You can hear. So this is a portion of Stravinsky's piece, but I've produced it such to make it sound like it's on an old vinyl record. And then you may have subtly heard there some analog synthesizers that I very subtly bring in, going into around sort of repeating phrases from the orchestra. And then this section is one chord from Rite of Spring slowed down like 100 times. It just is this blossoming thing. We'll hear it change. So originally that chord change was like a couple of eighth notes, but it's been slowed down like 100 times. And a lot of people recognize this bassoon phrase. As you can tell from the waveform, we're about to get into something a little bit more bombastic.
I heard like heartbeat.
Yep. So then it starts to get a little bit more wild. You're welcome to jump ahead a minute. I know you love to get to, I know you like the dance part. So about a minute ahead, we get...
The dance part is what, 4?
It's somewhere around there, I think, yeah.
Right there. It's called polyrhythm. Very chaotic.
So, yeah.
It's good.
Sure.
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
Okay,
So
okay.
the piece as a whole, it kind of crosses back and forth between these different worlds, and it kind of anchors in both worlds,
Yes.
and then cross-pollinates. The one part I always chuckle at that part because it reminds me of this YouTube video I saw of someone taking the original Stravinsky's Rite of Spring and putting it to dance sequences from John Travolta. And, you know, if you rhythmically line it up, it can be pretty funny. In this case, though, there was a lot of, because there were some very electronic elements that needed to be synced to the original Stravinsky piece, there was a lot of rhythmic tightening of Stravinsky's original as well, so that I could basically map it that no matter what tempos I changed, it would stretch or contract to match the tempos that I was using.
Yeah.
So that was a really fascinating project a few years ago. I'm super proud of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, we are almost at the end of the session, and I know you're not crazy about no, you're not crazy about this song, but I do.
Oh God.
I'll play a little bit, okay? I'll play a little bit of this song. What is it called? It's like a really cheesy, but it's really nice.
What is it called, Ching Juhl?
What is it called? It's called wait, let me think. Wait, oh gosh, it's called
Adore You.
Oh, Adore.
Yes.
Sorry.
So
Adore You. So what is this Adore You? Coming from also what, a film, right?
So this I'm sort of amazed that you found this, but I'm not that amazed since it actually is on a commercial release, but it has a fascinating story behind it.
Okay.
So this is a pop song that I recorded that I'm singing on in the mid 2000s. And in an earlier iteration of myself, I did more pop stuff. I mentioned before that I played in some bands as a keyboard player and a vocalist in high school and college and things like that. About 8 years ago now or so, in 2012 or so, I think, I had a slightly scary event where I lost my voice for a while, for about, I forget what it was. It was like a week and a half or something. But it was a significant period of time. And after that, my voice was sort of weak for a long time. I lost sort of the upper, I don't know, half octave to octave of my range. You'll hear some high notes in this that I absolutely can't sing anymore. And after that, basically, any sort of serious professional singing, I kind of just wasn't doing anymore. I sometimes wonder about, hey, should I start taking some voice lessons again and starting to learn my new singing voice? My voice is also, I used to be. I'm a bit more of a baritone now because my voice also dropped about half an octave.
Yeah.
In that period.
Yeah.
But this is from before that. And then what's cool, though, is about 5 years ago, I did a project called Manny in Real Life, where I was doing score, and it's kind of this whimsical small ensemble score, but they also needed some pop songs for a few of the episodes. And I said, hey, I've got some unreleased songs from earlier in my career. If you guys want to listen to these and see if any of them would work for your show.
Mm-hmm.
And they chose a few of them. And one of them is this R&B ballad from the mid 2000s with, it's not where my voice is anymore, but I'm pretty happy that it is saved for posterity, that once upon a time I had a voice that could sing like this. So,
I did not know it's you. Like, it's your voice. I thought you wrote the song.
Yeah, no, I am singing this thing.
I'll like it even more. Okay, let's go.
Right.
Here, I adore you.
Quietly, a whisper to my soul, it awoke me. She appeared, and suddenly I was able to wash away my foolish fears, my foolish fears. She gave her heart to guide my way. Since she is you, it's to you now that I say. When you capture my heart, you capture my soul, and you know I'm living for you. You know I do adore you. You wanna make it happy, do everything I can, never love like this before you. You know I do adore you. Sometimes you cry, sometimes you cry. You find me for the reason why. If I'm never the reason, just know that it's never my intention to hurt you. Heavenly, sometimes it's so hard to breathe when she walks in the room. The heads all start turning, and she can charm the world with her wit and her smile. But it's the thoughts of dreams behind the thoughts of dreams inside that makes us so damn truly amazing. Why when you capture the heart, you capture my soul, and you know I'm living for you. You know I do adore you, and I wanna make it happy, do everything I can, never love like this before you. You know I do adore you, and I know sometimes you cry. No, sometimes you cry. If I'm never the reason why, just know.
I saw Jeff James coming.
Jeff, thank you, Jeff. So it's not just me. Great, thank you so much.
So,
Okay.
definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely the first time I have ever sat on video listening to an old singing recording of myself.
Let's see, where did it go? I'm trying to. I lost my.
I think it's good. I think we've gotten the idea.
Thank you.
Oh,
yeah, I
man.
couldn't find the track on my browser. So many things. So anyway, yeah, that was awesome. That's awesome.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for uncovering that, even if I'm embarrassed. It's fun to
Like a
hear what my voice
falsetto. Yeah.
once did.
You had a really range. You had a good range. Yeah.
Had.
Yeah, you had. So wonderful. So, all right. Anything else you wanted to mention? And before we go into a very quick rapid fire?
Thanks and appreciation for those of us who've joined us here live in the comments and the questions. Please do subscribe to my very beginning YouTube channel again. So that's where we'll be. That's where we'll premiere the upcoming additional collaborative videos for Ritual, and you can also get links to streaming the album from there on YouTube as well, and all of that. So please share it far and wide, and that's the main thing I've got, other than this rapid fire round, which I'm mildly terrified over. Not sure what this is going to be.
Okay, so rapid fire is just that I do this with my guests just for fun. I mean, it's a short question and then hopefully short answer.
Okay.
But sometimes they just take off. They just start a really long answer. But anyway, okay.
I'll try my best to keep it short.
Yeah, just a few of them. Okay, all right. Thank you guys for watching, and I really appreciate you enjoying my show. Oh, by the way, I do this a conversation with a special someone every Wednesday, 4:00 New York time, 1:00 Pacific time, and today is episode 69. Since March, so it's been a very very wonderful to talk to friends, artists, or group of people under the pandemic, because we can't see each other that often. So anyway, all right, thank you, Jonathan Beard, for trusting me to talk to you.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's go. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
A book you read recent?
Our Towns by Jim Fallows and Deb Fallows. Fascinating book of them flying in a small plane all across the United States to different small cities.
If you were not a composer, what would you like to be?
I mean, of things I can do, give me a second. Of things I'm not good at, a baseball player.
Music you listen to while you're driving long distance?
All over the map. It could be anything from new electroacoustic music from sort of avant-garde artists that I'm interested in, to old, as you could hear from that last song, old Prince and Michael Jackson and Marvin Gaye and anything Motown. Lots of 20th century symphonic music. So all across the map.
Do you write music in the morning, noon, or late at night?
Morning is my magic time. I can write music anytime, but I love those early, undisturbed hours of the morning for sure.
When you write music, do you have to do it in your own studio or space, or can you do it in a coffee shop?
I cannot do it particularly well in a coffee shop. I did once compose a cue for a film in an airport, but it was a very small cue and I had a very long layover. Mostly, yes, inside of a studio. I don't need to be at my home studio necessarily. I wrote over half of Ritual in a studio that I set up in Makaha, Hawaii. And that was a really special experience. So I have a mobile version of my studio that I can also take with me to compose in other places.
Nice. What's your favorite junk food?
Ooh. I mean, tacos? But does that even count? I feel like that's healthy. Yeah.
Like when you write music, right? Do you have to nibble on things?
No.
No?
I don't. I usually forget to eat. It's bad. Suddenly I wonder why I'm hating everything I'm writing. And I realize, it's...
You know why I ask that is because, my brother who lives in China, who used to live in the United States, he's a composer.
Oh, okay.
And he writes film scores, theater music, and
Excellent.
He's a keyboard player. I just remember he always had food around him, like peanuts or something.
He's smart. He's keeping himself fueled. I need to remember to do that more.
Yeah, always have snacks. All right. Let's see. Can you name 3 or 2 your favorite documentary films?
Ooh, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is Werner Herzog documentary. I also love the score for that film.
Say it again.
Cave of Forgotten Dreams.
Favorite.
The Peter Jackson documentary from last year about World War I called They Shall Not Grow Old is one of the most amazing films I've ever seen, technically speaking.
Wow.
The way they the way they rescued and refurbished this footage from World War I, incredible. And a third documentary, I watch a ton of documentaries, so this should be easy. But now that I'm on the spot,
Have you seen From Mouth to Mozart?
No,
Oh.
I actually haven't.
It's a good film. It's a long 1976 film. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm aware of it. I've never actually watched it though.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I've been watching tons of documentaries, normal time, and now because I'm editing my feature documentary. Can talk about that in another session. So, okay, thank you. Well, you can tell me later.
I will mention that a documentary that I recently saw that was really good was called The Way I See It, which is this documentary about President Obama's White House photographer. Oh. And his discussing basically his photos. And he was also President Reagan's White House photographer. Wow. So being sort of inside the room where all of these, world decisions are being made and capturing that in photograph. That was a powerful documentary. I don't know if I would say it's one of my 3 favorites, but I definitely liked it. I forget if I don't think you just said I needed 3 that I liked. So that counts. I'm done. I got my 3.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So let's see. Oh, yeah. Ice cream flavor.
Ooh, I love anything with peanut butter cups in it. So peanut butter ice cream is good.
Yeah.
Or like vanilla ice cream with a topping of peanut butter cups.
Yeah.
Probably need to be my favorite.
Yeah. So what's your favorite food genre?
I'm super lame on that front. So it's either it's like the classic stuff of pizza, love it, sandwiches, love a great sandwich,
I see.
and burritos. Particularly in Northern California, the burritos, and in Southern California, the tacos.
Good answer. Last question: coffee or tea?
Coffee, but I like tea as well. I love coffee. I blame my wife for that, though, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Because I used to drink some coffee.
Is that
and then
Sarah?
I met her.
Is Sarah?
No, Sarah is my niece. But then my wife, Lindsay Strand-Poliak, very talented artist in her own right. But yes, I met her and she introduced me to the artisanal magic of coffee. So the 15 years that we've been together, I have become much more of a coffee person. Oh
yeah. It's wonderful. I remember a long time ago, 30 years ago, I do not drink coffee. And then I remember my brother said, "Oh, you miss a tons of pleasure out of life."
It's a good point. But there is a lot of pleasure to be derived from tea as well.
Yeah, I like tea too. Yeah, I like tea.
I'll always do coffee in the morning, but maybe herbal tea in the afternoon.
Yeah. What is your favorite alcohol beverage?
Whiskey. Probably Scotch, but I like bourbon as well. And
that's good.
Irish.
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. There are good whiskeys that come from many places in the world. So
yeah.
Can't limit myself just to Kentucky or to Scotland.
Whiskey. I remember that. If I ever see you again in person, I'll take you.
Please. Let's do it. There will be a post-COVID world someday where we
Yeah.
enjoy drinks together.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jonathan. And it's great to talk to you, and it's been fun.
This has really been a pleasure for me. Thank you for having me, Ching, on your channel, and for the wonderful discussion.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you guys. Thank you, Jeffrey, for hooking us up. It's all your fault that I know Jonathan. Yeah. So thank you for other guests for watching us. So until then, please be safe. Please take care of yourself, and I see you guys soon. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we're gonna end this broadcast.